Nameless undead awakens in an ancient crypt, and thus does the journey begin. Drawn mysteriously toward the horizon, he ventures into a land of perils beyond death. Hello and welcome to Liam's Lyceum. I am your host Liam, aka Ambar, and today I'll be doing a spoiler-free review of Michael A. Stackpole's Dark Souls Masque of Vindication. Masque of Vindication is the first Dark Souls novel, the only one that is out currently, and the only one I've ever heard anything about. It is a 2022 novel, came out at the end of October. It was kind of under the radar, and it is a novel that is technically Dark Souls, but I want to preface this by saying, since I've seen almost every review mention it, that this has nothing to do with Dark Souls, that is true. This does not have anything to do with any characters or places from the Dark Souls games. As I was actually told, Stackpole is not allowed to use any of that material, sadly. As I am not actually very familiar with the Dark Souls world as a whole, I was intrigued by the lore, mostly from watching my brothers play the game, because I don't play the game really that much either. I always thought, hey, if there was a novel for this, I would read it, and hopefully, because I like to read video game novels to get to understand the world better, I thought that'd be nice, but that's kind of not the case here. So it is not terrible though, so let me just continue on with my review. It is similar in a lot of ways to the game. An unnamed character is woken from death with no memory of a past life, though he quickly recalls actually that he is a sorcerer, and that's again from the first few pages. You actually do learn his name later on as well. It is a rather gothic tale, and I appreciate the ancient and entropy-ridden world. It reminds me somewhat of a Dying Earth, and it kind of fits in that subgenre, at least for the first bit of story. There are odd events, again, that kind of make it a gothic fable, even. Oddly, it is very much in line with the games, as far as mechanics go, if that's the right word for a novel. That's not the case with many video game novelizations, or really any good ones. The main character gets souls from killing things and can rest at bonfires and even responds at them, right? So that is very much like the Souls games. And generally when a novelization of a video game puts in in-game mechanics and you're like, wow, yeah, that's that ability from, the game or whatever, then that generally makes for pretty poor stories. That didn't actually hurt the story here. I actually thought it made it kind of unique. We admittedly don't get much combat described, or at least not to an excessive amount. Now, Faranos is my favorite character. He has that like dark solitude and mystery about him that I associate with Dark Souls. And then we also have Sir Kothra, who is another one that seems like a kind of a Dark Souls staple, a knight on a duty-bound quest, but he doesn't know what it is. So their adventures at the beginning of the story are my favorite parts. Once the story starts getting into a more plot-based like writing, it kind of becomes an epilogue and is just not as interesting. Admittedly, it comes off in a lot of ways. It still has this great weird gothic feel, but in some ways it doesn't feel as Dark Soulsy for some reason. Their quest at the beginning also seems quite inexorable and seemingly fatalistic. When we experience life, not just in death, it's a huge contrast as well. So I think there is a lot going for the story here, honestly. There is, in large part, people that have lived lives, very long lives. So we have Faranos and Crotha, who are again obviously undead. But many of these characters are not undead, they're just very ancient. Such as many of the Knights of Virtue, who personify one virtue or the other. And as well as the royalty of the Kingdom of Alkindor, which is kind of like a broken kingdom that needs restored, and that's essentially the plot of the story. And while the atmosphere is a strength, honestly, the story isn't bad. Dark Souls seems to have like a exoteric story anyways, and this one does not. So though it takes place it doesn't again take place until a few chapters in. It deals, I think, quite well with indecision, really well. I think Stackpole does a good job of that. And where you would expect a lot of antagonists to be, unnecessarily evil. That's not really the case here. I think but it kind of gives it the Fable feeling that I mentioned earlier, though. It's a little too long, though. I think the Fable bits go on too long. Even though it's a short novel, it just could have ended sooner, I think. But just trimming it, I realize novels in this length are in vogue, but whatever. And I feel like it could have been a little bit darker, have a little bit more of a Dark Souls feel. It just, it's a little like odd rather than dark in some spots. But it does have a nice ending. But then I think of someone like a few authors like Chase Fulmar or Christopher Rocchio or even Erika Siko, or however you say your name, would potentially be people I would ask to write a Dark Souls novel. Not that Stackpole's a bad author by any means. But anyways, those are just my random thoughts. Sorry, they're a little jumbled, but let me know if you've read this novel. It was kind of not, like, no one heard about it. I mentioned it to, like, several people, and none of them had heard about it. So anyways, Liam with Liam's Lyceum. I'll catch you next time.